Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
We had not beaten Iowa at home in 20 years. So the year before we did beat them in Carver, I was there for the duel, but I lost my spot my junior year to a guy named Jake Strayer who AA'd that year. He was finished sixth in the country that year. So I was on the bench for that one. And then we brought it home. That was my senior night, so it was my last match ever wrestled in rec. 2 years prior to that, we wrestled Iowa at home, and they worked us. And let's just say the practices following that event were not pleasant. The talks that we got after the event were not pleasant, and all that stuff was as fresh as could be in my mind taking the mat that night. You know, they made it so we didn't forget, and I didn't forget. And I wrestled the kid who was ranked sixth in the country. Huge swing match in the duel. I think people were picking him to major me at the time. I ended up getting the fall. We had 7,000 people there. Most exhilarating moment as a competitor. And then we ended up beating Iowa in an upset for the first time in 20 years at Rec Hall, which was super special.
What up, y'all? This is episode 18 of Airey Bros Radio with Bryan Heller, former Nittany Lion National Qualifier, head wrestling coach at Rumson Fairhaven High School, Publicity Committee Chair for USA Wrestling New Jersey, and the creator of the ATAC-App. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of Airey Bros Radio. Much love. Namaste. From the boys of 1512.
Yo, Mr. Heller.
Hey, what's happening?
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I might have to turn you down a little bit.
All right. I'm on Bluetooth. I'm just parked in my car. I don't know. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, you should be fine. We've had people on Bluetooth before, speakerphone, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Cool.
Hey, Brian, it's Jim's brother, Rich. How's it going?
How's your day going?
Pretty good. Another day in paradise here in the Mile High City. Better than most. Where are you at? Are you back in Jersey right now, or are you still in Fargo?
Brian,
can you hear us?
Yo.
sorry, I didn't have Rich on. He was talking to you, but I didn't have his mic on. So
he does that to me all the time.
Little brother thing.
Oh, tell me about it. Where are you back in Jersey right now?
Yeah, I'm in Jersey.
Okay. How was Fargo?
It was really good. It was busy, but that's how I like it. You know, the kids have competed hard.
How did the team do?
We did not as good as we would have liked to do, but we're making changes in the organization. So that stuff, you know, it takes time for it to sink in and get a culture change. And you kind of always expect a little bit of a dip. So going out there, we didn't have super high expectations. We had good kids and kids that worked hard, but, you know, we weren't sure what our potential was. So as a team, we dropped off, but nothing that we didn't really thought might happen.
Yeah, I saw there were some Jersey haters in some of the forums that were taking some shots at the. I think did Team Georgia have a pretty good performance?
Yeah, they finished fifth, which was incredible. I'm not exactly sure what's going on down there, but they have a program going and they're making moves. So we were definitely impressed with their showing. And you know, again, people have perceptions that don't contribute. You know, so
yeah.
I'm on the coaching staff. I'm also on the board for the USA Wrestling New Jersey, and we're trying to really, you know, to make a lot of culture changes that take time. So that's kind of where we're at.
Are there any of those culture changes you're allowed to can talk about, or?
Yeah, I can talk about them.
All right, what are they?
Yeah, So basically, there was an older regime, and they were fairly using their authority to hand select team members. So there's supposed to be a qualification process, and our qualification process goes through the local tournaments, the developmental tournaments, freestyle state tournament, freestyle ranking tournament. There's some other ways to qualify outside of the development local, which is like Northeast regions or any regional event. Some of the UWW World Team qualifiers can help you qualify. They were essentially saying, well, if they were state place winners in high school, that we could use that as qualifying criteria, which is okay to do. And if you want a really good team, you can do that and essentially just call kids up and say, hey, you did a good job in the folk style season. We want you to make this trip so we have a good team. But we're not promoting participation at our local events, and we're not really building a community of freestyle in our state. And, it trickles down to the club. So the club I work at is Triumph, and we never had a freestyle program until I took over. And I worked really hard to build a freestyle program there. And we're promoting kids to go to these local events to qualify for the tournaments. But if they go and they do well, and then they're not, asked to be on the team, it raises questions and flags saying, like, well, why am I spending my Saturday and Sunday wrestling at this tournament that I don't really know the style that well? I'm just learning. And the only reason I'm doing it is to try to qualify for these national level events. I'm assuming that I'm qualifying by winning a state tournament, but then I'm not asked to be on the team. So then it kind of goes back. So then why am I doing this whole club thing? So then we're losing numbers that way. So we needed to change that. We needed the perception to be that if you want to make this team, you have to participate. You have to come to the state tournament, ranking tournament, or some level of participation in freestyle to make the team, as opposed to just jumping off the Atlantic City podium and being on the team. And the other thing is, too, when you have camps like that and kids haven't competed against each other, they're not training freestyle, the camps are less productive, and there's no camaraderie. So we would go out there, in the past, I only did on one trip before we tried to make this change really this year, and the kids were kind of disconnected. We had, like, the Blair contingent, and we had the Bergen Catholic kids, and then we had, like, the South Jersey kids, and no one really knew each other. And this year I think we did a better job of intermixing the kids. They all competed a lot more together, and we had, like, single-day training camps that most of them showed up to, and then, multiple-day team camp beforehand. And that kind of gelled the group. So when we got to Fargo, it felt more tight-knit. Again, when you don't cherry-pick kids, the level wasn't exactly high school state placers and above. It was a little lower level of a tier, but we had kids like Evan Talmadge from Brick Township High School who did not place in the state tournament. Probably wouldn't have been a kid that was cherry-picked, went through the system, trained his butt off, placed and at the state tournament. He ended up winning, against his teammate via injury default, but still got it done, and then ends up winning the tournament at Fargo. So that's the success stories you like to hear, and then that ups his stock in the college scene big time. He's a young kid, so he's got time, but he's a product of the system, and that's what we're looking for, more of that.
Nice. What weight was that at?
He was the 106 pounder.
All right.
Which is it's pretty cool. Jersey's had some success at 6. We had Will Guida win it for us. He's won 2 titles down low, and now we continue with Evan Talmadge.
So with the qualification system and the ranking tournaments and all that stuff in place, is it less likely for kids to be able to petition on the team and more of having to earn those spots than it was, say, back in our day?
It's different. I mean, when I was qualifying for the team, I qualified 5 times, and at one of those times, I did not auto-qualify through a tournament, and I did petition on and had to wrestle another petitioner off. So basically, there's a certain number of slots allotted per state. So you can have, I believe it's either 3 or 4 per weight class outside of any Northeast region qualifiers. Again, the old regime was cherry-picking kids and then not letting more kids on. They just took a smaller group. It cost money to send kids in this tournament, so they were kind of saying, well, we're spending a lot of money for kids to not, have a great tournament. But, if those kids want to spend the money and have the experience and they qualified, I think they deserve that right. It's kind of not a state organization's place to be blacklisting kids, and I don't know the details of that. I don't really want to speak bad about the previous people, but we are making changes. So we still, to answer the question, we do have a petition system set up. We're trying to ask kids to at the state tournament, if they're not going to be there, to provide a petition at that time. So there's a reason you're not there. I'm hurt. I have this other training opportunity. I'm competing at this tournament. I can't make it. Or something that's planned in advance and not just an after the fact, well, my coach wants me to go, but I missed all the tournaments and now I want to get on the team. We're trying to kind of avoid that. I mean, this is definitely a work in progress. This year was not perfect. We improved it, but we're talking about establishing like a point system where you gain points through performances and using that point system to select the dual meet teams and the Fargo team. And we've had, a number of meetings already, which we're only like a week out of the tournament, but we're trying to get that under control as soon as possible.
Are the top kids in New Jersey, are they coming to those tournaments like state champs and stuff like that? Is there a lot of crossover? I remember back in the day, it seemed like all the high level kids that were on the podium down in Atlantic City were doing the stuff to go to Fargo.
Yeah, so we were talking about it, and that culture died, and that's what we're trying to bring back. We want competitive local tournaments. We want a competitive state tournament, and our numbers this year were up. I mean, one of the big things too, my role on the board is Publicity Chair, and we never had a social media account until last year, and we built a following this year. And it takes time to develop content and get people to start following you and such, but our numbers at the local events were up. We had a weight class where Peyton Kraft, who's from Ohio but wrestles for Blair, was wrestling Chris Foca in New Jersey at a state tournament with a bracket of 4 guys. So to have 2 guys like that wrestle at a local tournament, there's only 4 kids in the bracket. There is talent, but that was definitely the anomaly, not the normal. And like you mentioned, when I was growing up, the brackets were tough. To qualify, you had to beat good kids to get on the team.
Yeah.
It wasn't just to show up and beat the guy who didn't get out of the districts, which is kind of the experience right now kids are having. And that's part of trying to get more kids to these tournaments, is having some level of promotion. Like, you're going to see good competition, but, how do you get the first couple good competition kids there? Like, how do you get those top-level guys there? So we're planning on making some changes further, and one of those changes we talked about was like an NJSIAA liaison. So someone who has a role in the NJSIAA also work with USA Wrestling New Jersey to try to cross-promote. One of the ideas that we have, it's in preliminary phases, is having a handout to all the state medalists with either QR code or some way to get them to our info site to get them excited about participating on Team New Jersey. I think, one of the other issues that's different than we were growing up is the amount of competitions available in the off season. When we were wrestling, it was freestyle or bust, right? You wrestled freestyle in the summer or you didn't wrestle. And now there's 1,000,001 tournaments. This weekend's the New Way Nationals, I'll put that in air quotes, down in Atlantic City. You could be an All-American 8 times this summer if you go to all these quote-unquote national tournaments, where for me it was you All-American at Fargo, and that was the only chance you could put that title next to your name.
Right. With the influx of the folk-style tournaments that are popping up, or the folk-style summer competitions, have you also seen that high school coaches are tending to push the kids more towards the folk-style stuff and away from the freestyle?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a tough one. I don't think it's deliberate. I don't know if that's your question or not, but I don't think it's deliberate. I think that because there's so many opportunities, they don't need freestyle so much. Where there's open mat opportunities for them to train twice a week with all their teammates now during the summertime without going to a club. That really didn't exist too much, 10, 15 years ago. And then with all these summer dual tournaments, at Long Branch High School, there's duels every Tuesday and Thursday night that my high school kids go and compete at. There's like the Howell tournament, the Roselle Park dual tournament. And you get 5-6 matches in a short period of time. So there's those opportunities. So I'm not saying that the high school coaches are steering them away, but they're not promoting it per se, right? They're not saying you should be out wrestling freestyle. That's definitely not happening.
Yeah. Back in the day, it was just the old. Back in the day, it was just the Old Bridge Wrestling Festival.
That's right, the outdoor hockey.
Yeah, that's how old school I am.
So
man, I wrestled in that thing 10 years probably.
Right on.
So with the influx of all these Scholastic tournaments, it's kind of hard to take a kid who's been doing Scholastic his whole life, and then he goes to a freestyle tournament and he gets teched in 5-10 seconds, with a lace across the mat. How do you, as a high school coach or club coach, kind of emphasize that to these kids that they need to be doing freestyle, and it's going to make their Scholastic better, and it's just going to make them more of a complete wrestler?
Yeah, those conversations are always focused on positioning, right? So, you're in freestyle, you're going to get exposed, right? So, if you have poor positioning, if you don't wrestle out of a front headlock position, you're going to get beat in freestyle, where you might hang on for a stalemate in folk style. Someone's going to roll you across the mat. Or, if you relax in transition, so, if someone takes you down and you're not continuing to wrestle, that person's going to lace you up, they're going to gut you up, and the match is going to be over quickly. So I use that as a challenge. If you want to figure out where the kinks in your armor are, because that's how you get better, you find out where you're deficient and then improve those, you wrestle freestyle. Now, if you want to just be comfortable and win matches this summer and not get the best out of it, you can go wrestle folk style and get some good experiences, but it's not going to open your eyes the way freestyle will, right? So it's a much stronger opportunity to be vulnerable, and that is scary to some kids. Some kids don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to take losses, but all the great guys lose first, right? At some point in time in their career, they take a loss that helps motivate them to do something better. And I think freestyle is a great opportunity where you don't have to travel to Virginia to wrestle in the Jersey freestyle circuit. There's 6 tournaments. And then the Northeast Regions is right in Pennsylvania. So it is local, and it'll expose what you need to work on.
Yeah, Jimmy and I always talk about how hindsight being 2020, someone sort of forced us to do Greco and only Greco for the summer, because we were probably both afraid to tie up in high school or to hand fight and that sort of stuff. And that's kind of where the magic happens and where your setups come from. And yeah, I just wish pull-ups and Greco-Roman wrestling are 2 things I wish someone would have forced me to, or sit down and really had a serious conversation with me. Like, you need to do these 2 things if you really want to be a better wrestler.
Yeah, I know the Greco conversation is one that we talk about at the New Jersey level a lot too. I did wrestle Greco in high school, and I had some success. We don't teach it to our kids. I mean, I teach hand fighting a lot in folk style and freestyle. Wrestling in the Big Ten, it's like fighting in a phone booth, right? No one's going to give you a second to breathe. So you really need to understand those positions well. You need to be comfortable fighting like that. It's different than wrestling from the outside. The issue with the Greco is that we literally have a high school state tournament. The first freestyle tournament is 3 weeks after that, and then the freestyle states is 3 weeks after that. The Greco states is before that. So we'd have a month from Atlantic City to get kids prepared for a Greco tournament, and then 2 weeks after that's the freestyle state tournament. If you're training twice a week for freestyle, it's really hard to incorporate Greco and be at a level that you're ready to compete in both styles. And I think that it's more of a deterrent for our kids. Like you asked me, how do I get the kids to wrestle freestyle? Challenge enough, getting them to wrestle Greco is even more of a deterrent, because they're like, wait a second, I can't even stand in the same stance. I can't shoot. I can't do any of the things that are in my comfort zone at all. That's a tough sell. Where the freestyle, yes, it's different. Yes, the points are different. It's going to expose you, but at least you can stand in the same stance. You can still take the shots you like to take, and we're going to improve on those. The Greco sell is extra tough, and I know there's people that are like, die hard. We need to improve our Greco system, and I'm all for it, but it's tough for me to logistically understand how that takes place,
Yeah. Well, I think it's almost one of those things where if you come at it from like a biathlon type of, or like a you know what I mean, like a weightlifting where there's a clean and jerk and the snatch where you have to do both styles, and somehow try to score that or rank that a certain way to win a different aspect of a competition where you have to do both styles in order to win the competition. Maybe that might do something, but I know growing up I wanted nothing to do with upper body, contact. And there was a couple kids, coming up that were, they did freestyle, Greco, Sambo, all these different things. And I was like, what the hell are you even talking? What's Sambo? And then they'd throw me on my head and I'd be like, no, I'm just going to stay outside and look for outside singles.
Yeah, I hear ya. And we do go over Greco positions, but like you said, I mean, the Greco hand fighting is on another level. So if you want to get good at hand fighting, like that's an avenue to take. You're going to be hand fighting the whole time. There is no outside. It's in there. It's shoulder position. It's footwork. It's head position. It's being tough, and it absolutely serves its role in translating over to folk style for sure. It's just a tough sell in timing. It's really hard with timing. But I like what you said there. If we could somehow say, like, there's a freestyle champ at a tournament, a Greco champ at a tournament, but then there's the overall champ at the tournament, like to kind of gamify it a little bit and put kids' egos on the line a little bit, they might be more likely to do both. So I'll definitely throw that out there to
the absolute division.
Yeah, there you go, the absolute champ.
So
give them a belt instead of a medal. Kids love that stuff.
Yeah, they do.
Three older guys on here talking about wrestling, and there's always hindsight 2020, right? And we all see the importance in the hindsight in doing Greco, but I didn't do Greco in high school because I didn't want to lose, right? And that's mostly why deters most kids from doing Greco is because they don't want to lose. How maybe as a coach do you kind of let a kid know, hey, you're going to lose a lot. You're going to get your ass kicked when you first start doing Greco, but down the road, it's going to help you. How do you kind of emphasize that to someone?
Yeah, I mean, that's largely part of my coaching philosophy. And on my high school program, I tell the kids first week that we're going to put them through the grinder. We're going to wrestle in a tough schedule, and they can expect to lose. Because as a coach, if I haven't gotten you losses and you're not the outright favorite to win the tournament, I really haven't done my job. And I think that same mentality carries over to Greco. Like, if you're worried about losing right now, then you're not worried about winning later. Because that really, when it comes down to, it's a long, long journey, right? Like, we all wrestled for a lot of years in our lives, and no one weekend of losses hopefully defined any of us, right? Like, yeah, there are some losses that probably hurt more than others, but it definitely wasn't at the Greco tournament. It wasn't at the Winter Classic or whatever tournament you did in January. It was the stuff at the end of the year, towards the end of your career, that really had the impact on you. So, again, part of that also, besides explaining that to them, is kind of assessing goals, like putting tiers of goals together. Like, you have a long-term goal, we have some short-term goals, we have some behavior goals, but they're all working past moments. It's not just like this weekend, it doesn't define you. So if you're going to go to Greco tournament and go 0-2 3 weekends in a row, that doesn't define you as an athlete or a person or anything. It's just part of your process. So getting kids to buy into that is a process, right? They got to gain trust in you as a coach. It's got to be a rapport thing, and they have to look at you when you talk and know that you have their best interest in mind, and then sell it to them. And that's kind of what I do to get the kids to even wrestle freestyle right now.
Talked about goal setting and how you approach things as a coach. I saw that you have an athlete optimization course that you do with some of the kids at the wrestling club. Can you kind of just go into detail of what that is and what you do with that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you the full story. Basically, like most athletes at the end of their career, I was not satisfied with how I finished. I had goals of being, Division I All-American, Division I national champ. Didn't even make it to the show my senior year, and that sucked. And for a while there, I was like, broken about it. I didn't really want to coach wrestling. I didn't really want to talk about wrestling. I certainly wasn't watching it or participating at any level. And then when I started to get involved back in the sport, I started to reassess some things, like had to look at myself in the mirror pretty hard and accept what had happened to me was partly my fault, and it wasn't just like this sport sucks or, like to be bitter about it certainly didn't help things. So I started listening to coaches like Cale Sanderson and, some other coaches too, but mostly Cale, a lot of Cale, and listen to what they had to say about like training. And I was looking up, flow was just coming about, so a lot of these interviews became accessible and available. And I started taking notes and putting together my like roadmap to success, or like where my shortcomings were as an athlete, and how as a coach can I then not have my kids do the same thing I did so that history wouldn't repeat itself. So I started to come up with these principles, and this athlete optimization class is based on 10 principles, and those principles I have organized in sort of a pyramid scheme so that you can think about them non-linearly but with different tiers of importance. And the first one at the top of the pyramid is goal setting, and that's really having an ultimate goal. So what is going to drive you? What are you going to get out of bed at 5 in the morning? Why are you going to train when you're tired and no one else is training? That's kind of like, that's the ultimate goal, is going to force you to keep doing that stuff or help motivate you. Some milestone goals, those are shorter term goals that help you assess what your plan is. So if I want to be an NCAA champ and I'm struggling to qualify for the high school state tournament, I need to do some reflecting and say, okay, I'm not really on the right path. So those goals help with that. And then the last set of goals is behavior goals. And that's the stuff that you can control. So that is getting up at 5 in the morning to go for a run when no one else is. That is going to the lifts when you're tired, or going to work out, doing your 2 a day. Whatever those behaviors that you think are going to get you to your goal, to your ultimate goal, those are the things that you have control over. So we assign like behavior goals based on timing. So if it's, for your season, what's coming down the pipe, what are some of the things you need to change about your routine, and assess those. So that's at the top of the pyramid. The second pyramid tier is comprised of mentality and purpose and reflection. So mentality is just like kind of building self-confidence in yourself, clearing your mind, dealing with pre-match anxiety, things like that. Excuse me. And, we have like some subcategories in there. We talk about some meditation techniques with the kids, really basic stuff. Walking meditation, so breathing with step count, so breathing in for 3 steps, breathing out for 3 steps, things like that, just relaxing your mind. Visualization, both technically speaking, so you're visualizing the wrestling moves that you want to do in a match, and also visualizing your successes to help build that confidence. Affirmations, so what are you doing that you're believing in your process to accomplish your goal? So I'm going to be a champ. I'm going to be an NCAA champ because I'm lifting hard right now. I'm going to be an NCAA champ because I'm running 3 days a week. I'm going to be an NCAA champ because I'm doing the things that no one else is doing. And by saying those things, you start to believe it more. It brings some reality to the situation. The other one is self-talk. I heard from Dan Gable that he had a routine of words that he would say before every competition. During practice, he would say it, and it was kind of just like a Pavlov's dog trick. So it would be the bell ringing, making the dog think he's hungry. So he would say these words, and his mind and body would get into the mode of competition. So I forget what his words were.
Let's go, champ.
I use it with my athletes. What's that?
Let's go, champ.
Let's go, champ. One of the things that I say to my kids before this freestyle event, and this is kind of like a self-talk thing that I would impose on them, but shoot with your head up. We're going to sprawl when this guy attacks and then look for our secondary offense. We're going to wrestle through positions. We're going to be active on bottom, and we're going to work hard on top. And I said that to them before every match, and they looked at me, they acknowledged it, and it was kind of like, now it's time to go to war. Like that sets your mind in that place. So that was like the fourth of the mentality. The reflection and purpose. So that's looking back at your matches and reflecting on the good and the bad and the ugly. So what did I do really well in that match? What did I do poorly? And then what do I really need to work on? And that kind of eliminates the focus on the result and more about what took place. So you can have a really good match, but a really bad reflection, or you can have a really, a bad result with a good reflection. So it's really not the result that's the outcome. It's really like, how did you perform and where do you need to work? And then the second half of that is purpose. So you go to practice with a purpose. Now, I reflected on the weekend. My stance was awful. Guys got to my legs. I'm going to make sure this practice that I hold my position the entire practice. Now, coach is going to teach us wrestling moves, but the underlying goal for me today is to hold my position. So that's the reflection. The third tier being technique, nutrition, and recovery. So this is like the train smart stuff. So learning wrestling techniques, excuse me, everyone's doing it, but where are you improving? You have a really good sweep single, right? I know you just had mentioned that was your outside shot. You liked it. But there's always room to improve those things, and talking to the right coaches and making sure your position is getting better every year. You know, like guys who win the national tournament, or Jordan Burroughs. Everyone knows Jordan Burroughs is a good double. That double has improved over the course of time, and then, you know, now it's evolved into a secondary sweep and stuff like that. But he's always trying to get that technique a little better, not just, I got this one, stick it in your back pocket. So the technique is really focusing in on honing in on that stuff. The nutrition, this is like the biggest one for high school kids, and you see a lot of guys with success point to nutrition a lot. I know Jim and I, we both have the PN1 cert, and you know, that was huge in influencing this class, a lot of that stuff. But, you know, eating the right fuel for your body to perform at a high level is super important, and if you can follow that, you're going to have a leg up on everyone else. And then recovery, same thing. You work all the kids work so hard. If they're not doing the proper recovery, they're not sleeping, they're not timing workouts appropriately, they're not getting the maximum benefits of all their hard work. So just to kind of teach the kids that stuff. And then the bottom tier is the physical stuff of the pyramid, and that's strength, flexibility, agility, and endurance. So improving across those four physical things, kind of the foundation, right? The foundation of all this other stuff, but at the same time, everything, you know, is super important and almost more cerebral above that. Again, the strength training is just training your whole body with wrestling in mind. So you're training appropriately. Your rest times are good in between lifts. The flexibility, kids don't spend a lot of time on it. They think, oh, I'm not flexible, or I am. They don't realize that through proper training, through stretching with a regular routine, they can improve on that. So that's kind of eye-opening for kids. And like the cross benefits of lifting, and how if you're just lifting all the time, there's like a science behind what's going on, and the same science applies to flexibility. So that's important to know. Agility, you know, connecting your brain and your body is what we're focusing on. So like there's a central nervous system connection that you can cross-train through gymnastics, through footwork drills, a lot of stuff that helps. One of the analogies I give, if you're a righty and you have a really good righty high crotch and you want to shoot a lefty high crotch, you should probably be able to do right hand and left hand cartwheels first. That's a pretty easy thing for your mind and your body to connect on, and kids struggle with it. But hey, if you can be ambidextrous in a cartwheel, you can start leading with the other foot and thinking about it, right? There's a lot of mechanics in a cartwheel where you have a lead foot, you're moving your body a certain way, it's in a balance that translates through. So, you know, letting kids know about that stuff and then working through it. And then the endurance, I talk about 3 factors of endurance. 2 are scientific and 1's fairly mental, and that being the VO2 max, lactate threshold, and then what I have coined the empty the tank. So like, yeah, you want to increase your VO2 max, you want to increase your efficiency, you want to increase your lactate threshold, so your maximum capacity of effort. But then the last thing is, what if you've ran out of your efficiency? What if you've maxed out your gas tank, and now you still have to perform after those metrics have been shot? And how do you, react to that situation mentally? So I've kind of developed 3 workouts that I recommend for the kids that go along, one for each of those metrics, if you will. And so this athlete optimization class is a 9-week sit-down class, and we go over different aspects of this program with the kids. It's kind of like a classroom setting. I have a whiteboard, but I get them off their feet, and I get them involved too.
And this is a group setting? Or are you doing this one-on-one?
No, it's 20 kids.
Okay.
And that helps too. They feed off each other. I'm asking questions. I'm telling stories. I'm having them share experiences. So I think there's value to the group setting.
No, I want to sign up.
Yeah. So actually, this is kind of hot news that is fresh, and no one even really knows about this yet. But through this class, through developing this class, I wrote a curriculum, like I have this all on paper, and I wanted to be able to have more kids go through this. And then beyond just the 9 weeks, I wanted like a tracking system to help the kids really get this stuff into their routine. So, we wanted to build an app. I wanted to do an app for a long time. I ended up partnering with one of my wrestlers' dads, who's a marketing and advertising executive, had 20 years of Manhattan experience, works locally. And then we conceptualized this app. We brought a couple other people on board, and a year later, we're under development right now. So in early September, we're going to have a beta version out.
Sweet. Do you
Awesome.
have a name?
Yeah, so it's ATAC, ATAC, which stands for Advanced Training Athletic Club. So we're working on a landing webpage right now. Everything's kind of coming together. As soon as this call ends, I actually have a call with the other 3 partners to start hammering down the fine details. And then at 9:30 tonight, I have a call with our developer to go through some more of the algorithm stuff. But yeah, it's super exciting. It has a way to track all this stuff. The one extra thing, which Jim, you'll appreciate this too, the precision nutrition, is change psychology factors. Like kids always want to do everything all at once, and it's the New Year's resolution effect where you're going to try to change your entire life in one day, and by month number 1, you've already stopped doing all of it. So there's built-in safeguards. So the kids they're going to get a baseline assessment. What are you currently doing in your routine? It's going to assign a score to that assessment based on our algorithms, and then it'll allow you to add one new routine item for every 3 weeks that you're 80% compliant. So if you do all of your stuff for 3 weeks or 80% of your stuff for 3 weeks, it'll prompt you to add one more thing to your routine. So it's a build cycle as opposed to just like, it's the preseason, I have to start this now.
As you're telling us what the athlete optimization class is, I realize you kind of just answered my how would you Tim Ferriss wrestling and optimize your wrestling training. I could see you're already ahead of me on that one. But as you're explaining it to us, just the light bulbs are going off, and me and Richie are just looking at each other like, man, can we get a time machine and go back and wrestle for RFH? Because everything you're saying is speaking to us, dude. And as former wrestlers who have got into the coaching aspect of things and have seen different aspects of CrossFit, or whether it be the P1 class and being able to use that for wrestling, I just think it's awesome that you've taken that stuff and you've put it into your wrestling coaching, and that's what's going to change the sport, and that's what's going to make a positive experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's big for my kids, like I'm not so like we just laid out it pretty structured, and when I communicate with the kids, like on my team, it's less structured than that, but all those principles are always underlying, the way we train with those endurance goals in mind. We have a strength conditioning coach at the school that I make sure aligns with our competition schedule with the rest times, and we do hot yoga 4 times a year as a team to help build flexibility and that whole lifestyle. And it's cool. The kids, they look at you cross-eyed a little bit when you start talking about this stuff, but we built a culture at Rumson too where the kids buy in, and the kids that buy in, do really good. The kid that just graduated from me, Nick Addison, he's headed to Stanford next year to wrestle. He was a kid that maybe placed once in little kid states. I don't believe he placed as an 8th grader. He came in and had a decent freshman campaign, but nothing crazy. Did not qualify for the state tournament until his junior year. Really bought in after his sophomore year, and then finished 4th twice, and now is going D1. And he kind of laid a roadmap out for the kids, and he kind of had zero tolerance for the young kids that don't want to buy in. He's like, listen, you have these goals. You have to do the things that are going to get you to those goals. It's not just a nice thing to write down on your paper. You need to earn that goal. And having kids like that, it speaks to the other kids. And now we have a culture of freshmen and sophomores that want to do those things, that are focusing on nutrition already as 14, 15-year-old kids, without it being overwhelming, of course. But it's cool to see, that change happening at a small little school where we hadn't had a winning team since 2003 when I graduated until this past season. So it's cool to see.
That's awesome. It's a good thing when one, you see one little thing and you're starting to turn the corner when that one kid buys in and then starts to have success, and then it just starts to snowball. and one by one they start buying in. It's almost sometimes, or if you come into a new coaching situation, like you almost have to wait out, those juniors and seniors until you get your crop of freshmen and you have them for 4 years, and then you almost have to wait out some of the baggage from the previous program. Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing to hear that. What's that?
Yeah, stuff in high school. I said stuff in high school a little bit because you get what you get, right?
For sure.
And you need good leadership, and that's one of the things we found too. Is like we had when I first jumped into this, I had a kid that bought in right away. Quiet kid though, not so outspoken, and he had success and he did really well for himself. But we didn't see a culture change, and then when I took over, I had a freshman class, and the one kid I thought was going to be that guy, right? That freshman that was going to change the culture. He ended up not having a great influence on the kids, didn't really buy in as much as you like, and then you're like working backwards to try to recover from that. And then you have a kid like that just came through, and then now you're hoping that you can maintain that culture, It's not like college where you can bring in guys that buy in, like, oh, I'm not going to recruit the guy who isn't buying in, It's like you get the rec kids and see what you can do.
Yeah. Now, are you pulling that kid aside and having a conversation with him, kind of letting him know, hey, I thought either you've got a lot of potential and we need to go down this way, and I see you going that way, or I need you to be a little bit more of a leader? Are you having that kind of conversation with the kid like that?
Yeah, we try. I mean, I've mentioned it before, but building rapport with teenagers is like the most invaluable thing you can do. Because the minute you lose rapport, you lose them. And sure. I took that one on the chin with the kid that I mentioned that I thought was going to be the guy that didn't end up being the guy. I realized that at a certain point in that relationship, I pushed him past where he was comfortable, which you have to do a little bit, but it ruined the rapport, and then he kind of stopped listening at some point, And reflecting on that as a coach, I realized that, yes, I need my athletes to go a certain way to reach their goals. And, maybe that kid wasn't going to reach the goals that we thought he could have. And, a lot of coaches are like, well, then screw him. I'm just going to drive him to the ground. He's either going to make it or he's out, which is kind of counterproductive in my opinion. I'd rather that kid have a good experience. Hopefully we'll continue to wrestle on in college and then reach higher and maybe mature a little bit and find out those things through life, as opposed to, well, maybe he wasn't mature enough to handle that responsibility, and if I cram it down his throat right now, I'm going to do the opposite effect. I'm going to lose a kid who I really need to be a leader, So I think, there is a time and a place to have those conversations, and we definitely have them. Like, hey, you're a young freshman or sophomore. The kids look up to you. What you do has an impact on this entire team. I'm grateful all the time. I thank them. I make sure that they know that I need them and that I appreciate what they're doing, and that makes kids feel good too. It helps build that rapport, and then they're more likely to follow you when times are tough and you're saying, hey, you need to do something different than what you're doing. You've built that rapport to a point where they can hear that and react appropriately.
You went to Rumson Fairhaven, and you and Patrick Bergier pretty much put that program on the map. You were the two studs that Rumson had. What's it like for you now that, you were one of the people that put that program on the map when you were in high school, and now you're there and you're making a change and kind of get to build it your own way?
Yeah, it's cool. It's fun. I mean, like you mentioned, Patrick and I, we had a good career, and we set all the records at the school. And now none of those records still exist, which makes me happy as a coach. I want to coach kids past where we performed, So all of our accolades are being overshadowed by the current crew, and that's exactly how I want it. And I still text Patrick every time one of the records get broken. I'm like, well, another one down, You were the fourth place finisher, which is the highest in school history. A kid just did it twice, so you're the second on the line now as the highest finisher, Just, a little playful, but it's really cool to see. But also, like I had my moment, and as a coach, I had 5 losing seasons before I had a winning one. It's going to be a long time before I can make up for that as my coaching record. And I really don't care. It's really about the kids, and it's probably cliche to say that, but what makes it rewarding for me is when kids have life turnarounds. You know, when you see a kid who kind of looks lost as a freshman, and then by the time they're a senior in high school, they have their crap together. They're going to a good college to wrestle, but also, you know, to gain life experience and then be successful in life. And for me, that's what feels the best, and like that's the most important. And with that, though, too, like the hard times are equally as important. You know, you connect with these kids at a level that when they don't reach their goals, it's equally as painful. But that's like a real emotion that you can't really replicate anywhere. You know, so it's a cool thing to be a coach and have that influence on a kid, and you kind of like go down this road with them. They buy into you, and you're right there along the way. You know, we have Saturday morning runs right now during the season, during the summer, 100 degrees out. Kids are doing it. I'm right there running with them, and I'm right there when they get off the mat at the state tournament, whether we're high-fiving and cheering or we're like, you know, behind the stage reconciling our situation against the metal gate that everyone hates and throws their headgear at. So like all that stuff as a coach is like the most important. You know, like I'm not really looking to build a coaching dynasty. I just want my kids to learn these lessons and buy in and hopefully become NCAA champs in college. That would be the optimal situation. And then, you know, from there, they've learned a work ethic that's going to translate for the rest of their lives. If they're an NCAA champ, it's going to be tough to screw up your life, I think. I think.
Yeah, pretty much. That's a beautiful thing, and that's something that warms my heart because I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of high school wrestling coaches that are in it for themselves or in it for the accolades or building their coaching dynasty and not necessarily out there for the kid and are willing to put their arm around the kid and console the kid and like, hey man, it might have been the state finals, it might have been the consies, but life's going to be good, everything's going to work itself out, and this is just one step. This isn't the end-all be-all that you weren't a state champion or you didn't get third place. And we've all seen those coaches that lose their shit and throw a tantrum and are drawing more attention to themselves than what's actually going on the wrestling mat by the way that they're carrying on or the way they're jawing back and forth at one another. So to hear that and the stuff that you got going on is, like I said, I want to sign up, or like Jimmy said, I wish we could have a time machine or you know, because, yeah, I think unfortunately there are some high school coaches out there that are in it for the wrong reasons, be it to build a coaching dynasty or they never accomplished what they set out to accomplish, so now I have to make up for it as a coach.
Yeah, for sure. And people are like open about it too. You know, they want to like compare your rap list as a coach, and it's like, what does that actually mean? You know, like you had kids that were dedicated. That's what that means. It's not like it could be a reflection on you as a great coach, or the kids might hate you and did it despite of you. You know, like who really knows what's happening? But yeah, it's cool to see. Like I know I have a lot of colleagues that feel the same way about it, and parents can be the worst offenders too. And
yeah. We
have a parents meeting at the beginning every year, and one of the things I try to remind them is, if you're this mad, think about how your son feels or your daughter feels. Like I remember as a competitor what it felt like to lose in the round of the state tournament that you weren't prepared to lose it. You know, I wanted to win a state tournament. I never did. So I know what it feels like to come off the mat after a loss like that. And the last thing I need is for someone else to tell me how they feel about it. Like, you were there with me every second when I was training, you know? Like, it's not your place. So I remember that as a coach. Like, as bad as I feel or as mad as I feel, this kid feels at least 10 times worse about it. At least.
Yeah, I love the perspective, you know, years of experience bringing to the table. You had, like I said before, you went to Rumson Fairhaven, and then, you know, you're a big fish there, and then you went to Penn State. Just kind of tell us what that learning curve was like and kind of how long it took you to get adjusted when you were at Penn State.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, my senior year, I didn't give up offensive point until the quarterfinals of the state tournament. So I wasn't used to getting scored on, and I was used to scoring a lot. It took me a good 6 to 8 weeks of practice before I scored a single point in practice. So it was shocking. You know, I kind of knew what I was getting into, but no one really knows what they're getting into until you're in that room getting it put on every day. And I had guys like Josh Moore, who was the national runner-up that year, ahead of me. And, he let me know he was the alpha, right away. It was bloody mess every day. You leave that room with a ripped T-shirt once a week at least. It's part of the culture. And then, you learn that and you give it to the freshmen coming in. And it's so important. Like, at the time, you're in hindsight, you're thinking back, like, man, that was brutal. But then years later, you're like, well, that was really necessary at the same time. I had a coach, John Hughes, who coaches at Lehigh right now. He kept me and this other guy, Tim Haas, after practice a handful of days every single week, a good 45 minutes, wrestled in a group of 3, and it was me wrestling this guy, Tim, and then each of us wrestling Coach Hughes, and we were beat up. We had already had a 2-hour practice, and now we had another 45 minutes alive with a coach that was a 4-time All-American, multiple-time national champ, real deal, putting it on us. And I remember distinctly sitting in the showers. We dragged chairs in the showers, looking at each other going, what do we do to deserve this? This is awful, And then, 15 years later, I realized that Josh Moore was graduating. They had 2 kids that were in that weight class, and they wanted to know who their starter was going to be, and that starter had to be ready to go in the next year. And that's what that was. That was our trial, our tribulation. We were either going to make it, and one of us was going to emerge, or we were not going to make it and they needed to go look somewhere else. And so, the importance of that was invaluable. But as far as, finally becoming acclimated, I was thinking back today, when was the first time I felt okay as a college wrestler? And it was the Cleveland State Open in January of my freshman year, before I actually felt like I was competing at a college level. Before that, I was taking lumps. If I beat someone, it was the guy that was, nobody who was, I probably shouldn't have even been in the same tournament as, and I picked up a W, and then everybody else I was losing to. And finally at Cleveland, I had a couple wins over high state place winners from other states, and the guys that were top prospects as well in the open circuit. And then I kind of carried that momentum and let it motivate me to continue along the path I was on. And I did win the starting spot the next year as a second-year guy, a sophomore. And that was where the acclimation started to form. But even in the Big Ten schedule, I don't think anyone's ever prepared for that. So wrestling in those dual meets, showing up to the home match with 3,500 to 7,000 people and a TV camera overhead, I don't know if I ever really got comfortable in that atmosphere until late my senior year. It's just like a different stage, than you're used to.
Did you get to wrestle at Carver Hawkeye?
I did not in a dual meet, but my Big Ten tournament was there. So my freshman year, I wrestled in Carver for the Big Ten tournament, and you feel the arena. I mean, it's crazy to go down the elevator to the floor, and you feel like you're in the movie Gladiator. You're surrounded by screaming people, and you're below the ground, and it's like, we're going to go to war here, and it's the Big Ten tournament's the real deal, and it was really cool to have that experience.
I know you just said you never wrestled at Carver Hawkeye, but I know we got a good segue here with that. I think it was your senior year, you wrestled Alex Serchitz, who was like the number 1 ranked wrestler at the time, correct? At Penn State?
So he was ranked 6th, yep.
Yeah, so he was ranked 6th, and I'll let you finish your story from there.
Yeah, so part of the backstory that not many people know is that we had not beaten Iowa at home in 20 years. So the year before we did beat them in Carver, I was there for the duel, but I lost my spot my junior year to a guy named Jake Strayer, who AA'd that year. He was finished 6th in the country that year. So I was on the bench for that one. And then we brought it home. That was my senior night, so it was my last match ever wrestled in rec. 2 years prior to that, we wrestled Iowa at home, and they worked us. And let's just say the practices following that event were not pleasant. The talks that we got after the event were not pleasant, and all that stuff was as fresh as could be in my mind taking the mat that night. They made it so we didn't forget, and I didn't forget. And I wrestled the kid who was ranked 6th in the country. Huge swing match in the duel. I think people were picking him to major me at the time. I ended up getting the fall. We had 7,000 people there. Most exhilarating moment as a competitor. And then we ended up beating Iowa in an upset for the first time in 20 years at Rec Hall, which was super special.
You still got a videotape of that somewhere?
Yeah, he does. I've seen it.
Yeah, man. Someone has it on YouTube. I think my dad has like 12 copies of the DVD. We got the home video. We got the one that was on Fox Sports Pittsburgh. It's pretty cool. I have, as my senior gift, I celebrated. That was the one time I gave a pretty solid celebration after. And there's like a large blow-up photo of that. And what's cool about it is the crowd is in the background freaking out. And my dad, I was flexing, and my dad's in between the flexed arms, and he's making the same face I'm making. Just such a cool moment. Such a cool moment.
Those are good moments for sure. As a Penn State alum, they brought Cale in. When they first brought him in, did you think that was, did you think it was going to happen the way it's happened?
No. I was fresh out of school when Cale came in. Coach Sutherland, my head coach, had another year or two maybe, and then Cale came in right after that. So I was a part of that culture. I thought that we had what it took to be a national contender, and we just didn't get the job done. I kind of mentioned all the stuff that I went through in my athlete optimization class that we didn't have, but at the time we were trying to emulate what we thought was the Gable style of wrestling. Super hard work. We're going to outwork everybody. We're going to be warriors out there. We're going to win with our pace. We're going to do all that stuff. And I thought that culture was what it took to win the national tournament, and we weren't winning at the time. So I was thinking, all right, great. Cale Sanderson, undefeated in high school, or in college, world gold, Olympic gold. He's going to do a good job, but how much impact can one person have overnight? And then he had overnight impact that, just unreal. And again, I mentioned it earlier when I was trying to think back, like, what was I doing different? That was one of those things where it was so close to home. Like, I don't think we sniffed the top 5 when I was in school. We may have finished top 10. We have a ranked high, top 3, but never really at the tournament put down a performance to get close to sniffing a title or even top 5. And for him to make that change, and guys that were on my team were on teams that won national titles, and I was like, wait a second, this guy can't clone himself and put him on the mat. Like, what is going on that's so different that can make such a change in such a short period of time? And that's where I started really listening to what he had to say, and being grateful. The rapport stuff that I'm talking about, you can see that he has a good rapport with his athletes, and then a lot of the other stuff, the recovery, the nutrition, all that other stuff kind of came from, well, there is more to this than I thought, and for him to do that is unreal. His accomplishments as an athlete are unprecedented. This turnaround has to be somewhat unprecedented too. It's crazy.
He's had a pretty solid run, and I don't think he's looking at retirement at any time soon. But it goes back to what you were saying, where I think I talk with Jimmy about this all the time, and my thought is that as good as Dan Gable was for American wrestling, he was just as bad too, because his style of training became the only style of training. And I think Jimmy said at one point there was 30 coaches in Division I that were all Iowa alumni. So that umbrella just covered the country, blanketed the country with that, just, we're going to outwork them, we got to work harder, we got to do more. And that may work for some people, may have success with that, but for a lot of other people, that's not the way to skin the cat. There is recovery, there is nutrition, there is mindset, there is technique. There's all these. There is, the recovery, and I think Cale has just brought that to the forefront, and then to see things like Cornell pop up, and I think you're going to see a change in Arizona State, and I'm just waiting for Cal Poly to call me, because I will take that job in a second. Same with Stanford. Kids coming from New Jersey, I don't know why there's not more people looking at things like Arizona State and Stanford or Cal Poly or some of these beautiful places where it's 75 degrees 365 days a year, and every girl on campus is a 10.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of good sells out there, but those are some pretty hard sells too.
Yeah.
Wrestling at Penn State for 4 years, what do you think either lessons or experiences that you took from being at a Division I Big Ten program for 4 years that you took with you into your coaching?
I mean, not to get away from hard work, because I know there's other things on top of that, but hard work really is the foundation of success. Like at anything you do, you got to put in the time. You got to be focused during that time, and you got to give it your maximum effort to see the maximum results. And one of the things that I've told my athletes was that I was getting beat up so bad, I didn't know what else to do but to exhaust myself every practice and try to work as hard as humanly possible. And yeah, you need to recover from that, and you need to eat right to help you with that, and you need to be as strong and as flexible and have the agility and endurance and all the other aspects of the athlete optimization class I was talking about are important. But if you do all that stuff and you don't work hard, you're still not going to see results. You still need that work ethic. So I tell my kids, you should be addicted to exhaustion. You want to make sure every time that it's time to turn it up to 11, you turn it up to 11, and you accomplish what you need to accomplish during that time. And that, and then also just because I went from a guy that was 7th in the state and as a senior in high school to a guy that didn't score on a single kid for a long time in the room to breaking into the lineup, being an NCAA qualifier. Yeah, I didn't reach my goals, but I grew as an athlete so much. It did open my eyes to like, all right, with hard work, you can make changes. So, stay the course, be resilient, don't sweat the small stuff, and you will see success. And I've taken that, my entire career professionally as well. I was a rec park tourism management major in school, which is, my wife calls it underwater basket weaving. And now I'm successful in a consulting career because of the time I put in and the resilience and the attention to detail, and just applying all that stuff to anything you choose to do will make you successful in that stuff. It's not a promise, but it gives you your best shot for sure.
As a coach, I know you mentioned before that, there was a time when you got done wrestling and you were kind of over it. And I know I had that part of my life where I was over it. If you wrestled, I didn't want to talk to you. I didn't want to deal with anyone. I just wanted to be done with it. But, through wrestling being such a big part of my life and who I am, in those rough times in my life, that's where kind of I got the appreciation for wrestling and kind of remembered who I was. What was it that kind of brought you out of that and brought you back into coaching?
Yeah, we have the exact same experience, I think a lot of guys have that. There's a couple things. I mean, I've definitely reflected on this, and I think part of it is like, again, that hard look in the mirror and taking some responsibility for what took place, and knowing that it doesn't define you. And I think a lot of people can agree with this. You deal with some depression when you didn't reach your goals and you put in 20 hard years and things didn't come together. And I think overcoming any type of those negative feelings requires reflection. So I think just like looking back on the moments and finding the good parts of it and recognizing how valuable that experience was for my life and how unimportant not reaching those goals were actually, really helped me to like, okay, I'm okay. I can now firmly say I was not an All-American. I didn't win a state title. I didn't win a national title, where there was times where just bringing that up brought some dark thoughts into my head, and it was difficult to talk about. But now, like, as a reflection and realizing that stuff doesn't define me. No one in my life that means anything to me gives one half of any iota about how I did as a competitor. No one cares. So realizing that was one of those pieces to the puzzle. And then the second piece of the puzzle really was a couple key people that made me have fun in the sport again. The name that comes to my big time is a guy, Marcus Alma, who really got me back into coaching at a high school level. He got me reinvested in the sport, like taking a role beyond just showing up to club when I felt like it's a help coach. Like, I all of a sudden had a responsibility to the sport, and he was the one that kind of like pushed me to do that. He listened. He was super respectful, tough kid from my hometown that had goals and was willing to put in the work, and he kind of like was the reason I took the head coaching job at Rumson, and then a lot of this evolved through that. But even before that, like Jim, you and I had some fun training experiences. And I remember the first time we scrapped after, when we were competitors at the same time, it was that short thing. I still remember the day. I remember the workout. I was running a workout. We had this warm-up that was these line drills with buddy carries, and it was an intense warm-up that I was doing at the time. And you and I did it together, and I remember, like, man, this kid works hard and is smiling, and you liked it, and you were, like, ready to go at all times. And, you had a different outlook at the time than most people in the sport. The sport's evolved a lot in 10 years with having fun and opening their minds to different techniques. And, you and I both wrestled with a style that was partially frowned upon at the time, that people wanted to be just the basics all the time. And I want that too as a coach now, but I recognize the need for and the place for funk and stuff like that. So rolling with you was, you and a couple other guys of that era helped me to get over that hump too, made it fun again. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, no,
I had the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, because I don't think I've ever told you but growing up wrestling, I had watched you in the region finals before we ever met, and then I remember rolling up to the Maryland duels for freestyle, and you were on the team, and I'm on this team with all these state place winners. I remember looking at my dad going, I don't think I should be here. Like, I should not be on this team. And I did, you were cool, and you were the surfer kid, but most surfer kids that I knew didn't give a shit about wrestling. But you kind of had that cool vibe, but you gave a shit about wrestling and working hard. So that kind of always drew me towards you. And then, meeting up with you at Sure Thing, getting to reconnect was awesome. But I really appreciate you sharing your experience, because I kind of had the same experience where I had a realization that, I didn't reach my goals as a wrestler. And, being a wrestler, we're always so goal-driven, and it was kind of ashamed of myself that I didn't reach these goals. But then, as I get older and experience a little more, you realize that, it's so cliche, but it is the journey, right? Your journey is your medal, is your belt. And I can look back at those times and realize that, hey, I didn't accomplish this, I didn't accomplish that, but going for those things helped me get to this spot in my life, or going for those things kept me alive during this really tough time in my life.
Yeah. Awesome stuff.
I
appreciate you saying that too about, following me and stuff too. It means a lot.
Oh yeah, dude. You're a big part of growing up wrestling at the Shore 100. Doing the P1 nutrition class, and obviously it helps with the coaching, a lot of coaching pointers in that class, but it's a sports nutrition certification. How do you take that knowledge, or just what your thoughts on nutrition are, and kind of implement it into your kids, and kind of make them realize, hey, if you do this nutrition thing right, you're going to make everything else way easier for yourself?
Yeah, I definitely I focus in on the science behind it a bit. Like, there's hard science that proves you are what you eat, and how your body reacts in circumstances is directly related to the food you eat. So part of it is like enlightening them to that knowledge that just like a better wrestling technique wins matches and lifting weights is going to make you stronger, the nutrition aspect has a scientific foundation to it. It's not just some hokey, like, yeah, you are what you eat, what your mom tells you, which is great, but I can eat a bag of Skittles and take the wrestling mat and wrestle pretty tough. They don't realize that, like, yeah, put that bag of Skittles down, eat properly throughout the day consistently, and your performance is going to get better when everyone else is going down, and letting kids know that that's truth helps. And then the other part of it is just not being so hard-nosed about it. I know, like, meal plans are a thing that if you follow a meal plan, that's definitely the best way to go, right? If you can be regimented enough to follow a meal plan and eat all the right things all the time, that's definitely the best thing. But recognize that high school kids need to operate on a continuum. So first, let's just talk about what good food choices mean in the cafeteria. I'm not asking you, you're 14, your mom doesn't cook every night for dinner, it's going to be tough. So I recognize, like, the limitations a high school kid has and say, okay, what are we eating in the cafeteria? And I have this conversation with my kids all the time. Like, yeah, there's a chicken parm sub, but there's also grilled chicken, salad, and a fruit cup. And there's, you can be drinking water in that Snapple. And those things are going to make your practice better. I challenge you. We're going to have a hard practice. Eat like crap and feel the practice. eat healthy, come to practice, and tell me how much better you felt tonight, after the practice, during the practice, tomorrow morning, all of the above. And kids, after our practice, when they're beat up, they're like, all right, what can I do to make this better? And they try to, like, if you focus on that, they kind of learn that stuff. So I definitely think it's like everything, it's twofold, that rapport with the kids, making sure it's accessible to them, and also giving them a reason to buy in, not just because coach says so.
And how much of that are you going into with the parents at the parents meeting? Because I coached high school for 11 years. I taught special education for 11 years, and you can sometimes get through to the kids, but if mom and dad aren't on board, or if mom and dad are going to Wendy's, guess what? Jimmy's having Wendy's too, or whoever it may be. So I always try to approach it where, that first meeting of the season is like, let's get to the parents and really kind of get that emphasis to them. And ideally, if you can get them to make those changes, it's going to be easier for that kid to come home and have that appropriate meal plan for them.
Yeah, I definitely pitch it to the parents. I focus on all the aspects, and again, I think as important it is to build rapport with kids, it might be more important to build it with the parents, because the parents, especially Rumson's a pretty well-off community, so the parents have the resources to get outside coaches. They go to club, they have a strength coach, some of them have nutritionists, some of them have mindset coaches. They have these other resources that they don't need to listen to you all the time. So, building that rapport, like, I do have the best interest of your kid in mind. I do know that I'm around him as much as anybody else. So what I say is relevant beyond just, like, the vacuum that the other coach might be working in. They may only have an hour with your son a week, where I spend 2 hours at least a day, 6 days a week. So 12 hours a week is a lot of time. And that, like, if you can allow me to have an influence on your child through you buying in and listening, it's going to have a big impact. So they do listen. The other good part about living in a well-off community is a lot of the parents are educated, and we don't have a lot of that fast food lifestyle going on.
Right.
So I don't really have. I can understand where that could be in other areas. Like, I'm definitely grateful and fortunate that boundary, that roadblock, isn't something I've had to deal with too much.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that at first, but yeah, you're probably not worrying about the RFH kids going to McDonald's or doing those sorts of things like we were in Red Bank.
I mean, I definitely have kids that, like, their situation isn't as good
Sure.
as you would think in Rumson and Fairhaven,
Right.
but even just to be like even if you're struggling financially in that community, which happens, for sure, you're at least educated enough. Not that there's a lack of education all the time, but there's just a little different, maybe peer pressure to not do those things. It's just a lot of factors that go in, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective on nutrition. I think it's such key. I think if I had to think of, a couple hacks for wrestling, I think nutrition and strength training could take a kid that's 500, to the state tournament. I think it's something that's so underemphasized, and I just think it goes to lack of education and lack of knowing.
Well, I would add the Greco wrestling, pull-ups, and vegetables. Those would be the three things I would go back and tell my former wrestling self.
Yeah, I was a vegetarian for 7 years, and I never really felt better than that. My system was as clean as it gets, and it felt great. I mean, meat again now, but I try to keep it clean. But it also helps too, like, as a coach, like, you guys are both coaches as well, and you both live a lifestyle that you're leading from the front, so it's easier for kids to buy in when you have, like, if your nutrition coach is eating fast food, it's kind of tough, but if you're a nutrition coach, and I eat super clean to this day, and, like, I still outwork my kids in the hardest workouts, and they look at me like, how the heck are you doing that at your age when you're not, not that I'm old, but I'm not 17 anymore, and they eat that stuff up too. It's pretty funny.
When were you a vegetarian? Was that when you were in high school or after?
No, so 2 years ago I went off the veggie diet. So let's back it up. So 2010 to 2017, I was a veggie.
Okay. And now you're back on the program?
you're back eating meat.
Was there any one particular thing that brought that about, or?
Yeah, man, so I did it to eat clean, and I felt great, like I said, but I was losing muscle mass, and there is a way to do it, but when you're so active, like my activity level just kept upping and upping and upping and upping and upping, and I was watching my body shrink, and I started taking protein supplements to help me recover after workouts, like not necessarily strength workouts, some strength workouts, but even just after like grind or wrestling practices, I was taking protein to help get my muscles back in shape. And then I realized, like, you know, the protein supplements I was taking were like clean, as in they weren't tainted, but there were still ingredients in there that didn't follow what I was trying to accomplish. So, you know, and then I started buying like super clean supplements, and I'm like, you know what, at this point, I might as well just find a very clean source of meat to eat and just do it that way, because that's more in line with what I would like my kids to practice, is eating like natural, you know, sources of this food. And that kind of like just set it off. You know, I finally just like pulled the plug. That's it. I'm going to make this change. Go back.
Yeah, I was telling Richie a couple days ago how you always used to blow my mind that, you know, when we were hanging out, that you were lighter then than you were when you were wrestling in college.
Yeah. I still am a little light. I'm walking around like 44, 45, and I was walking around like 49 in college. But then when we were hanging out back again, I was like in the low 30s again, which was lighter than when I was 16. You know, crazy.
Yeah, I remember that. You and Richie always kind of have those that crazy DNA. You just get better with age. But growing up, going to the Edge, and then you went to Penn State, so you had the ability to be around some really good coaches. What coaches really had a big impact on you as a wrestler and who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a stream of coaches. You know, the first club I went to was Hammer with Miles Hahn, and you know, he instilled a work ethic in us at a very early age. He lined us up like soldiers and yelled, "Hit it," and everyone hit the shot, and then set, and everyone was back in a stance and hit it, and it was like military drill. So I learned at a young age what like militant hard work was. You know, I was 8 years old doing that stuff. Was surrounded by guys like Damien and Kurt Pellegrino and some other kids that were super successful high school athletes when I was a young kid. So he definitely had an influence on me. You know, my dad was my coach for 10 years, and it took me a long time to like realize the influence he had on me as well. It's, you know, I talk about it with parents now. It's like it's tough when your dad's trying to get you to make your bed and be home on time and do all this stuff that dads have to do, and then also want to critique your high crotch. You've kind of heard enough. You know, at that point in the day, you're like, you're the guy who's on my case about everything. Like, I really don't want to hear from you. And as a parent now, I like recognize where that balance is tough. But my dad also did, like, you know, he guided me through strength training in a way that wasn't available to most kids. He had a chart on our wall with what weights and reps I should be doing and the number of sets, and it was cool to lift with him and fill that stuff out. And he spent a lot of time watching technique videos. He never wrestled and helped me develop as a wrestler, so obviously he had a big one. Ernie Monaco kind of gave, like, the head coach at the Edge, gave a little bit more cerebral of an approach, so I take that with me too, the way he explained things a lot differently than any coach I'd experienced up until that point. And then the top of the list, the guy that I can say was the number 1 through 5, all the same person, was Tim Dernlin at Penn State. He was a guy who wrestled at Purdue, All-American. He was the only guy on the staff that wasn't a Penn State guy, and he just had a little different approach, way more similar to what Cale had. He was the guy that was kicking me out of the wrestling room saying, "Yo, you are training too hard. You're working out too much. You need to settle down. You need to eat better." You know, like my off year, my junior year where I wasn't competing, he was looking to make the world team, so he was competing, and he pulled me out of practice with coach's permission, and we had separate freestyle workouts through that year, and I really connected with him. And you know, as a competitor, when I look back, the changes I made during the time that I got to work with Coach Dernlin had the biggest impact on me jumping levels. From when I first started, he was on the staff, and then he left my junior year, and I had to do it on my own after that, but the influence I drew from that really helped step me up a notch. And then as a coach, the way he loved the sport and laughed at every practice and still worked his butt off. We'd be choking each other, and during scraps, we'd be beating each other up, and then he'd be hugging and laughing and playing weird music and just making it a fun experience that I had never experienced that from anyone else. So Tim Derlin definitely 1 through 5 top influencers on me in the sport of wrestling.
And he's with Rudis now, correct?
So no, that's Matt. Matt Derlin.
Matt.
That's Tim's brother.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yep, they're brothers. Matt was on the staff too. He was a more middleweight guy, so I didn't coach with him. He didn't coach me as much. Tim actually left. He went to a D2 school. Jim, if you remember when you were floating around, and we were Ashland. Yep. I think I had introduced you to him, and I told you at that time, like, this is if you're gonna follow a guy, this is the guy to follow.
Yep.
And then he since is out of coaching. He's a headmaster for a classical Catholic school, so like old school Catholic school somewhere in either Delaware, Virginia, somewhere down there. It's unfortunate that he's not coaching because he was such a good influence on, I imagine, everyone that had that experience with him.
Being so into the sport and so passionate, who are you studying now? What are you taking tips from? What wrestlers, what coaches do you like watching?
I'm all ears. I like taking it all in. I mean, as far as like the wrestlers, I've been into like the Eastern European stuff. Like I have some jokes, about some of the techniques I show. It's a lot like I'm using my feet a lot more, and just watching like the Russian nationals and the international scene is kind of like mind opening. Like at one point in my life, I thought I knew every wrestling technique there was, and then you realize how much there is that you have no clue about. You never felt this and that. So getting a perspective from these athletes that train freestyle their whole lives is a different perspective than the guys who are crossover from folk style who still have a lot of influence. I mean, obviously there's guys in the country, watching Jason Nolf wrestle. Like, I know both of you have jiu-jitsu experience, and I try to explain to kids, like, there's pathways to points. That's a philosophy that's kind of lost in wrestling. That's like pretty prevalent in the jiu-jitsu. The little jiu-jitsu experience I had was more like a slower, stoic pathway with different on and off ramps, and you're going to use this and use that, where wrestling gets tend to thought about me just grinding. So watching Jason Nolf, you kind of see that he's never overly committed to any one position. Like, he may take a shot that he's out of there faster than he's in there, but he always has plan B, C, and D lined up. And I think that's kind of why he doesn't get tired, because he's never hanging on a leg, trying to pull the leg in for 30 seconds, which typical wrestlers do, right? We get to a leg, it's a dog on a bone, they don't want to let that leg go. But if you watch Nolf, he's never stuck in any position. So he has a big influence on me. And then coaches, I listen to Kale a lot, but I still like listening to Tom Brands and those likes. I think he has some cool stuff that he says, and there's just all kinds of, with the age of Twitter, Instagram, and Flow Wrestling, you really can listen to so much. So I really like hearing everything as much as I can, and just taking like the little snippets and sticking them in the log and bringing them back for the appropriate moment.
When you're structuring a practice, are you kind of just winging it, or do you have a outline that you're going into that practice with and certain goals and objectives that you're looking to work on?
A combination. I think there's definitely a combination where I have a certain structure that before the practice starts, I know, like, all right, we're going to do this in our warm-up, we're going to do this instruction, and then we're going to get a hard drill in, and we're going to wrestle live, and we're going to do some sort of either conditioning or cool down, or depending on the workout. So I have that, and I have an idea of what positions I want to cover during our hard drill, what techniques I want to show. But it's always an audible. We might be going down a road, and then you realize that your audience has a different thought than you do, and you realize, wait a second, I was going to show the next 5 steps of this, but really we got to go 2 steps backwards and reassess our baseline here. Like, I thought we could handle this, but we can't, or we need to spend more time in this position, and our hard drill is going to be a little less today, or like maybe we're going to get our cardio in this hard drill. The kids are working super hard, so we're going to keep that rolling and do a little less live, and definitely calling audibles the whole time. But for the most part, I have like a generic structure that I follow, and then I just tweak it with what I need to accomplish. And you know, like part of that reflection and purpose thing I do as a coach too, I watch a dual meet and say, this are the things as a team that we most need to work on. What are the ways that we can get kids to make that change? The combination of putting them in that situation during live, doing it fast motion, but also cerebrally, like slowing it down, getting the kids to slow down and just actually do the right thing. So it's kind of a combination of all the above.
And at this point, with the clubs and everything, are you getting freshmen that are coming in with no wrestling experience, or at this point, or does everyone coming into to RFH have experience as a wrestler?
We have a really good rec program, so we do get a lot of kids that wrestle in that, but then also have bought into the club scene early. So like, you know, we get freshmen every year that have been wrestling all year round for many years. And then we also get the kids fresh out of the hallway, which is so important for a wrestling program in high school. You know, for a while we were just getting the club kids, and I had like 6 hammers and then 6 forfeits. And you can't win dual meets with 6 forfeits.
No.
So I realized that you need 6 to 10 hammers, and then you need 15 other kids that amongst them are going to work their way up and be contributors on your team by their 3rd, 4th year, and you're not going to have gaps if you can build that in. Yeah, so we definitely have, like, I know we had an interest meeting in the springtime, and I had 9 freshmen sign up that they're interested in wrestling, 9 incoming freshmen, and I think 3 of them we knew about. So there were still 6 kids that had 0 wrestling experience that are going to be in the room next year.
Nice. That's good for development. What with the realignment and stuff, what district and region are you guys in now? And how do you feel about the realignment?
So we're in Region 5.
Okay.
We've been in District 18 and 19. I'm going to be honest, and I'm not even sure which one we left off on because it changes every 2 years. But yeah, District 5. To some degree, I like it. We don't, like, you know, so I work at a club, and it was pretty much all Region 6 kids at the club. So the blood round of Region 6 was like, you know, super painful because we had all our kids wrestling each other, knocking each other out of the tournament. And when we realigned, we saw a lot less of that. So we had kids separate into a lot of different regions. But it's mixed feelings. You know, Region 6 has a lot of history. It's Region 6 Hall of Fame. You know, I had some pride in that, and I liked my district. Was tough. We had a lot of tough schools, and you know, there was some like dynasty style things going on where, you know, we wrestled the same district schools. You know, we trained to beat those kids, those teams every year, and it was kind of a cool thing. So I miss the nostalgia of it. But like as a coach, if you just separate like that from reality, I think it's better. I think there's a distribution of power that's more appropriate to get the best kids at the state tournament. I think that you know, switching who you wrestle the district based on previous results helps. And then, you know, you have districts that pretty much all have 10 to 12 kids in every weight class as opposed to 15 kids in a weight class in one district and 6 kids in another district at the same weight class. That doesn't seem fair. So I think as a community, we needed the realignment. I think it's better for the sport, but I do miss the nostalgia as a you know, long-time shore conference wrestler.
Yeah, we all do.
Region 6 all day, dog.
Region 6 for life.
Yeah, that's right.
Does Rumson have a female program, a girls program?
No, so we don't. We had one girl last year, so she got to wrestle, and actually she was bout number 1 of the inaugural region tournament, which was really cool for her and us as a program too. Well, it's something we're looking to build. There's logistical issues. You know, we need more coaches. Biggest issue is mat space. You know, we have one practice mat set up in a cafeteria that 2 teams can't share at the same time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I talked to the AD about what can we do to build this female program. I think it's important for wrestling. I think it's important for high school athletes and women to have that opportunity. So as a high school program, we need to work out the logistics of that. But that being said, I literally just rolled up to Triumph. I have Thursday nights, girl nights. So I have a girls class. I coach from 5:30 to 7 every Thursday for girls around the area. It's small right now, but trying to grow the opportunity for them. There hasn't been really like a sole class. Usually they have to wrestle with the boys, and that kind of limits inclusion. So this is, the girls who come, they can go train with the boys too, but we made sure we did like a girls membership, girls night, so they feel like they have their own thing too. So I just walked into the locker room, there's a couple girls here too.
Right on. That's good. I saw the someone posted a photo of the parking lot at Red Bank Regional for the girls Region 6 tournament, and it was just packed, and it was such a good thing to see. I think the more people that are involved, it's just going to be better for the sport all around as a whole. When everybody does better, and there are some badass girls and women out there that could probably mix it up with the boys if they needed to. Anyway, I know that was back in the day. If there was a girl on the team, everyone was. You were never going to hear the end of it if you got beat by a girl. So it's good to see that they've kind of separated that, and now they've given them a platform for them to have their own success. And then now with the development in the college level, to see it even getting bigger and bigger. I mean, I think it was Lockhaven that just added female women's wrestling Division I. And we were on the phone last week with my college coach from Monmouth University, and I was planting the seed with him to go talk to the athletic director there to say they needed a women's program at Monmouth, because I didn't think that they would ever have a men's program. But I think with the female athletic director, we might be able to get a women's program going over there.
Yeah, man, it's really cool to see. I was at that, the Red Bank tournament, and it was packed. It was so awesome. And this year, as a state tournament with the girls there, that contributed to us having the best turnout as far as fans are concerned. NJSA made more money in the state wrestling tournament this year than any other single event, so that's important. I think the women had a big role in that. You double the families down there, you double the fans, and you give more people something to cheer about, which is awesome. And again, like I mentioned, it's just good for female athletes to have the opportunity to compete in the sport that we know is really good for human development. So it's definitely super cool. I'm all in favor. And, part of that USA Wrestling New Jersey board I'm on, we have a girls' council, and we're working to improve our girls' numbers that go to Fargo every year. And we had a good show. We only brought like 14 girls this year, and we had like 7 All-Americans or something, which is crazy. Like 50% of the girls AA'd. So it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that female wrestlers are getting more opportunities. I was trying to think back yesterday, and I wasn't sure if it was you. Pretty sure it was you. But I remember when we went to Maryland, we wrestled like Maine, and there was a girl on their team, and if it was you or someone else, but someone fived her like twice, and it was brutal. it was brutal to watch. So knowing that that's not a thing, and females get to wrestle other females, that's just always going to grow the sport. Because I think the pushback to girls wrestling for all those years was just girls wrestling boys and not having a separate sport.
Yeah, for sure. And right now, there hasn't been dual meet opportunities yet in New Jersey, aside from a couple marquee programs had enough girls to wrestle dual meet. So a lot like the girl Bella Serrano is a state champ from Manasquan. She was the starting, I believe, 120 or 113 pounder for them and their boys team. And that's a tough role to fulfill, And she had a tough season, and she scrapped hard, but then smashed her way through the girls tournament and had like a crazy final where she got a re-attack takedown with no time on the clock to send it to overtime and won a state tournament, So it's cool that she had that opportunity to cap off a season that otherwise could have been brutal,
Yeah. Bryan, we appreciate your perspective so much. Knowing that there's wrestling coaches like you out there just gives me hope for the sport, dude. 100. We need more Bryan Hellers out there in the world. It got me super excited about wrestling today. I'm going to be hitting high crotches on the way home. Before we get you out of here, just let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, so Twitter and Instagram, it's Heller Coach. Heller Coach, and that's kind of where I'm at, mostly on the Instagram scene. And then keep your eye out for ATAC, so it's ATAC, Advanced Training Athletic Club, and our website will be ATAC-App.com. So keep your eye out. That's going to be dropping in the next month or so, and we're super excited to roll that out and be able to reach a much, much, much broader group of wrestlers.
Yeah, send us all that good stuff when you have it up and ready or the beta's ready, and we'll pump it out there for you. We are stoked to check it out, and like Jimmy said, it's So refreshing to hear your perspective and know that there are wrestling coaches out there, because I think a lot of kids, especially in my era, you came away from the sport with a bad taste in their mouth, be it from weight cutting or old school coaches. So to hear your perspective on everything is amazing. So keep doing what you're doing, keep crushing it.
Thanks. Yeah, man, I appreciate all that stuff, and I appreciate you guys too for doing what you guys do. A great podcast and a platform, and always been, following you guys on social, and love all the stuff that you're putting out there too, all the good vibes all day. So I appreciate you guys as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan. Have a good night, sir.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon, Jimmy.
Take care.
Later.
That was good.
Yeah, it's always good to get the perspective of a like-minded person who might feel the same about you as a sport, and someone who might be reading those optimization books that we're reading, or listening to Rogan, and kind of on that same wavelength, and to know that there's someone like that out there. The first couple of words he talked about with the 9 different tiers, it was just like, oh, all right, you're speaking my language right now.
Yeah, no, when he talked about the moving meditation and the 3 inhale count, 3 exhale count.
You got me.
I'm trying to get adults to buy into that shit, so you're speaking my language. But it's and just the yoga and the nutrition, and I really think, nutrition is it's almost at a certain point it has to become the primary conversation for wrestling. Definitely, I'm right with you with goal setting and mindset and affirmations and intentions and all that. And maybe I'm just so old and so far removed that I don't know how much it's changed, but I know when I had that small part in wrestling for those couple years when I was coaching, it didn't seem like it had changed, at least with the knuckleheads that I was coaching with. You know what I mean? So I think that first and foremost, getting through to the parents, making sure the parents are on the same page, but again, if the parents don't buy into it, or the parents are eating junk food or aren't healthy, it's going to be very hard for that kid to cook his own food or to go buy his own food. I mean, you're really going to be a very strong-willed, determined kid that I'm going to do this the right way, and I'm going to go work and buy my own groceries and prepare my food. So the kids they're kind of at the mercy of what's going on at home. And you really have to get through to the parents, because if you're not getting through to the parents, then that's where you're going to have those situations where kids are starving themselves, or I think there's a whole conversation in terms of post weigh-in, what's the protocol after you weigh in, and that's a whole different discussion depending on how much weight you're cutting before you get on the scale. Because if if I'm getting on the scale and yesterday I was 131 or whatever, so I guess that means I'm either, gonna go sweat a little bit and wrestle 130, or I'm gonna go and wrestle 135, and then there's really no post weigh-in protocol. But it's not like I'm sucking down to 125 and then I have to, so having that precision nutrition stuff and being able to present that to kids is just, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and having the coach that's into it too, right? It's one thing telling your athletes to cut weight, but I remember my coaches, getting burro burrito or whatever, and we're in there sucking out, and they're making fun of us because we're cutting weight, and they're trying to tell us to cut weight, but you're eating burro burrito and giving me shit and telling me, oh, I need to go for another run. So when you got someone like Bryan who's doing it, he's living it, he's probably living it more than any of the kids on the team, you're going to take advice from that guy. You're going to listen to what he's saying because he's practicing what he preaches, and you and I both know it's the coach that takes his shirt off. It's the coach that is the product he's trying to create. That's what he is. So that's why it's so refreshing to hear someone like that, and then to kind of go on to your topic about what you were saying with what are you putting in your body after weigh-ins. You have an hour. You have an hour. There's nothing you're going to do in that hour that's going to have any benefit on you if you're cutting lots of weight. So therefore, cutting weight is obsolete, right? It's something that in practice, it might look good on paper, but you and I both know if you're cutting from 135 to 125, that hour is probably going to do more damage to you then good, because you can only, it says in the Precision Nutrition book, you can only take in so much liquid, so many calories that your body's going to be able to absorb. Everything else is just overkill. And I don't know how many times before wrestling matches I had to go in the bathroom and make myself throw up because I wasn't processing all the shit that I just put in my body, all the liquids. You don't drink liquids for 2 days and then you're trying to get it all back in an hour. And that's where, the shit in your pants on the mat happens. That's where the bad performance happens. So to know that there's people out there that are putting the right information out to the kids, that are leading them in the right way, it makes me warm and fuzzy about the sport, man. Like me and Bryan said before, that there was periods in our life that, and more so because of us, because of things that we did and pointing the finger at everyone else. But knowing that there's people out there that are doing it the right way, it makes me feel good about at least those kids at Rumson Fairhaven, that they're getting taken care of and they're going to have a positive experience when it comes to wrestling.
Well, yeah, not just only the kids at Rumson, but the kids at Triumph too. And you like to think that if kids are going to a wrestling club, they're getting some of that, but not on that level. Not on that level with those, like those tiers and that sorts of stuff. So I mean, that's huge. Or him mentioning that they do hot yoga a couple times a year, and knowing that flexibility is something just like strength training, that the more you do it, the more it's not, like he was saying, that old school mentality is like, oh, I'm just not flexible, or oh, I'm just big bone, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's just those old school kind of mentalities where it's like, oh, I got flat feet. Yeah, how many fucking times do you hear people say shit like that? It's like
wearing their New Balances.
Like, so that, yeah, having that mindset and having that platform to do that with those kids from Rumson are in good shape, and I'm looking forward to seeing a small school like that do well is always, coming from the borough and a small school. It's always good. You always root for the little guy, and going up against the Brick Memorials, the Howells, whoever it is at this CBA in cross country or even in wrestling nowadays. Always pulling for the little guy.
Yeah, and it's also awesome to see someone who, one, went to the school, who's a genuine, really good person who wants the best for the kids, being able to take that program over and kind of making it into his own. Because Bryan was one of those kids that was going to all the extra stuff, was going to the edge, was doing all the Team New Jersey stuff, so he knows what it takes, and he did it at Rumson. So now he has the ability as a coach to kind of help those kids, so maybe they don't have to do all the extra stuff or travel so far because they have him.
Yeah, and that's what ideally that's what you want in a community, whether it's in the school or the police force or the fire department. Like, you want people that live in that town to be working in that town, So I don't understand why more schools don't do that, but that's like a big thing for Rumson, is they want people from the community coaching. At least back when I was interviewing there, they didn't want the teachers coaching. They wanted people from within the community coaching, and you see that a lot, and that reflects it because there's, like Timmy McClune's the cross country coach, and you see how much he cares about the kids and about the program and the sport itself.
Well, that's awesome, just in the fact that you don't have to settle for a teacher in the school, right? How many coaches had they got the position because they were a teacher in the school that applied for it? Having people from the community who have expertise on it, hey, yeah, they're not a teacher in the school, but they can do better for our athletics than what we have, so why not grab from them?
It's a broken mindset. That's how they think.
Well, that was just refreshing to hear Bryan talk about Team New Jersey and all the changes in the board of directors and kind of changing the way they do things. Because I had the same people that you had that was doing the Team New Jersey stuff, all the directors and stuff. And if they're still there 10 years after I'm gone, like, what good are they doing? You get set in your ways, and stuff's easy when you do the same thing all the time. That's easy. That's comfortable for you. But maybe the stuff that needs to be done isn't as easy. So to get fresh blood in there, people who are reinvigorated about the sport, that want to really push the sport and show how great it can be, I mean, that's a plus, no?
Yeah, change is always good. And it goes back to what he's saying. It's about the kids. It's not about you. It's not about your accolades. It's not about building your dynasty. It's not about thumb in the butt. You know,
John!
You're better than that or whatever. Look at me, look at me. It's not about any of that bullshit. And believe me, I at a point in time as a coach, a young coach, it was about accolades. It was about, I'm going to use this as a platform to get to coach at college or whatever. And it didn't matter. Like, we're running and we're going to run into the ground. And there's an evolution there. And now for me, like what Coach McGee was saying, it's like I want people to be lifelong runners. And maybe you can't be a lifelong wrestler, you know. In some regard, you can still, there's other outlets. You can do jiu-jitsu, you can coach, you know, but you could still be a lifelong athlete. You can still have, you know, there's valuable lessons that come from being a wrestler. And too often times, in my experiences, I've seen coaches that ruin that experience for kids because it's not about the kid, because it's about me. And like, I didn't have a state champ this year. I didn't have a state place winner, you know. And like he was saying, I don't need you to tell me how bad I feel or what I did wrong. I already know what I did wrong. I fucking lost.
And I feel it.
So I don't need you to tell me how bad I did. And I also don't need you to not talk to me.
I need you to be an adult. I need you to do your job, which is be an adult.
Right. Be an adult and know that you're here for the kid. I'm here for you. You're not here for me. You're not just a pawn. And that's, you see that too, like I said, in my experiences. Things may be different in certain areas, and there are great coaches out there. Don't get me wrong. There are, you know, whether it's club, college, high school, there are amazing coaches out there. You know, and some of them I've had the experience to be on Team New Jersey with or whatever. But there's a lot of douchebags out there as well. And I'm not, you know, I don't want to, and it sucks that people know that, whether it's in that community or in that administration of that school district, and those people are allowed to continue to act like that and do those things year after year after year after year.
Well, I think it goes to Mark Janko's book, Inner Jiu-Jitsu, and Mark was talking to us about being a true martial artist is giving back to your art, to your craft. It's not so much what you can do right now on the mat. It's after you're done on the mat, what can you give back? And I think Bryan is someone who understands that's his place. That's how he's giving back, and that's something that I've come to an understanding. It is, yeah, I'm never going to be a national champ, but I can help a kid have a better, more positive experience, and in certain situations that I did, I can be that Coach Byard. I can be that Mike. I can be that Gene that can make this a positive experience. So when this kid looks back or he's having trouble, he's going to get through it because he went through my program. He's got my philosophies. He's got my concepts, and he knows that everything he did on the mat was to prepare him for this really rough spot now not on the mat. You know, and that's athletics. And the older we get, that's the more I see and more I comprehend that, yeah, I really let those gold medals, I really let those bad performances get to me at the time. But at the end of the day, like Bryan said, you still talk to me. Mommy, Daddy still talk to me. The people who I have in my life.
I don't always talk to you, but.
No, you don't. But that's another podcast for another time. The people that are in my life are going to be in my life regardless of those outcomes. And if you're not in my life because of an outcome, then maybe you're probably someone I don't want in my life anyway.
No, 100%. I mean, it's a good listen, good philosophy, good mindset. Wish I could have come up in a program like that or gone to a club like that. And it just makes me happy. And like I said, it warms my heart to know that there's a guy like that out there doing it like that for kids, and there are kids that have the opportunity both at a public school and at a club level that get to have that experience and work with someone that's that passionate, that into it, has the pedigree and the resume that he has. So, like I said, just looking forward to following RFH in the years to come and what he does with that program, and then also to see what this app is like and what that benefit can bring to high school or just wrestlers in general.
Yeah, 100. Gonna keep an eye on RFH and the app for the athletic optimization program. But had a good show today, Richie. Thanks for being here with me. For the Airey Bros, I'm Prince James.
This is the 100-Mile Dick, a.k.a. Richie Butt Stuff.
Namaste.
Oh, I forgot to do that, huh?
Yeah.
Until next time, folks, it's the boys from 1512. Much love. Namaste.